My son sold my house and gave the entire $735,000 to his daughter-in-law for expenses. I thought the money would go toward my son's medical treatment. I thought we would cure his bad heart. And then I saw the new car and the sparkling diamonds on my daughter-in-law. Now I had nowhere to live, nothing to eat, and my heart was breaking with the realization that my daughter-in-law had taken not only my house, but my son's life. I looked at my son with sadness in my eyes, waiting for him to somehow explain everything. The silence in my son's voice was like a slammed door. "You did the right thing, Mom," he said, not meeting my eyes. Now I had nowhere to live, nothing to eat, and my heart was breaking with the realization that my daughter-in-law had taken not only my house, but my son's life. I looked at my son with sadness in my eyes, waiting for him to somehow explain everything. The silence in my son's voice was like a slammed door. "You did the right thing, Mom," he said, not meeting my eyes. $735,000. That would cover everything. He meant it. He promised. But the bracelet on my sister-in-law's finger reflected the light, and I knew where the money had gone. "You sold my house," I said, setting my mug down before my hands betrayed me. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon toast and furniture polish, the familiar boldness of early morning. He nodded, small and guilty, like a boy who'd broken a window. She looked innocent. "For expenses," she said quietly. "Doctors aren't cheap, travel isn't cheap, life isn't cheap. We all have to be practical." She tapped her fingernail on the marble as if counting her blessings, each finger a new gift: spa packages, salon memberships, a convertible parked outside house like a laugh. I stared at my son's chest the way I used to when he was little and coughed at night, counting his breaths and praying for the frightening sounds to go away. "You said a cardiologist," I said. He winced, then looked at her, and I saw it. The thread that connected them tightened. It would cover everything. He was serious. He had promised. But the bracelet on my sister-in-law's finger reflected the light, and I knew where the money had gone. "You sold my house," I said, setting my mug on the table before my hands betrayed me. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon toast and furniture polish, a familiar morning sass. He nodded, small and guilty, like a boy who had broken a window. She looked innocent. "Expenses," she said quietly. "Doctors aren't cheap, travel isn't cheap, life isn't cheap. We all have to be practical." She tapped her fingernail on the marble as if counting her blessings, each finger a new gift: spa packages, salon memberships, a convertible parked outside my house like a laugh. I stared at my son's chest the way I had when he was little and coughed at night, counting his breaths and praying for the frightening sounds to go away. "You said cardiologist," I said. He winced, then looked at her, and I saw it. The thread that connected them tightened. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "We've taken care of everything. You don't need that big apartment anyway. We'll sort out your stuff." She smiled, that soft, gracious smile people use when they've eaten the last piece of pie and want to say thanks for the crumbs. How could my own son let my life turn into checks and jewelry boxes? How could you look at the woman who supported you through the fevers and layoffs and say, "Sign here, it's just a house"? I'm old enough to know the difference between grief and insult. Grief waits for you, insult waits for you to shut up. So I folded the dealership key fob into my palm like a note passed in church and nodded. "You're right," I said, and let them think I was cringing. They didn't notice the folder that was already on my desk, the one with my lawyer's business card, my bank statements, and a list of every purchase since the deal. They didn't notice the witness. Little did she know that I had already begun counting backwards, starting with $735,000, skillfully telling one lie at a time. But to understand how I learned to do this, I need to go back to the beginning. After my husband died, the house became a map of the years I had survived. The doorframe with pencil marks that stopped at my son's last growth spurt, the scuffed stair where my granddaughter dropped her doll and cried as if loss had just been invented, the piano that kept me company, evening after evening, when the nights were too long and the phone didn't ring. I put my son on the deed 2 winters ago when he said it would simplify things if I ever needed help. He used the word probate like a weather forecast we could avoid with a better umbrella. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He is my only child. The first small theft was time. My daughter-in-law began booking his cardiology checkups on days she knew I taught piano lessons. She called it streamlining. Then she took over his prescriptions, added herself as a point of contact at the clinic. So efficient, I almost thanked her. When I offered to drive him to tests, she said, "Oh, don't worry, he feels better when I'm there." I told myself to be grateful for love I could see but didn't fully trust. I noticed other edits to our lives. The family ring I loaned her for their 10th anniversary reappeared with a new setting, heavier and glittering as if it had eaten its own past. She stopped making coffee at my house because she preferred the machine that cost more than my first car. She smiled when I looked too long at the receipt still curling on the counter, all decimals and promises. "Points?" she said. "It's all about points." When the house went on the market, I didn't know. The stager brought in white sofas and hid the piano behind a rented plant. The listing said vacant, a word that felt like a diagnosis. And while buyers made offers, my son had a scare. Tightness across his chest, that shamed breath, and then the ambulance lights. I learned afterward that she had signed release forms and bills and even changed the emergency contact number from mine to hers. He called me from a hospital bed sounding far away and told me not to worry. I made soup that went cold on the stove. The sale closed on a Monday. By Tuesday, the diamond had appeared on her wrist. By Wednesday, a convertible in the driveway with a temporary tag and a sales sticker so fresh the glue still smelled like victory. By Thursday, she texted me a photo of an infinity pool with the caption, "You should see the spa." And somewhere in that week, my son's next cardiology appointment was pushed by scheduling conflicts. I started with what I had: the key fob, a manicure, a smile too satisfied, the bank alerts I had set up years ago because I'd learned not to trust quiet months, a voicemail from my granddaughter asking if I could pick her up from ballet because mommy was at something called Metasculpt, a receipt drifting from a purse like a message in a bottle. I stacked each small thing into a pile big enough to feel like a plan. Then I went to see a lawyer. Her office had framed diplomas and a bowl of hard candies, so old the wrappers had become part of the candy. She listened without judging, which is another reason I trusted her. She said words like constructive trust, undue influence, breach of fiduciary duty, words that sounded like doors I could still open. "You put your son on the deed," she said, not unkindly. "That complicates it, but the proceeds belong proportionally. If he diverted your share, if she benefited through fraud, we can ask a court to freeze assets and account for funds." "What if he just gave it to her?" I asked. "What if he thought he was doing the right thing?" "Intent matters," she said, "but so does outcome, and so does pressure. We'll need proof." "Proof?" I walked out with a list and a retainer plan that made me catch my breath. On the sidewalk, I met the neighbor who had brought lilies to my last birthday. She teaches chess to fifth graders and reads people like a board. "You look like someone who needs cake," she said. I told her I needed copies of everything. She became my first co-conspirator. I call her by her name when I'm being honest, and by dear when I'm trying not to cry. She persuaded the realtor to print the closing statement for the file, persuaded the notary to recall who signed and how quickly, persuaded the dealership to tell us the date and price of the convertible. I'm considering that model. What kind of incentives do you offer? The numbers formed a trail. The $735 left escrow landed in an account with my son's name and hers. Within hours, five-figure sums bloomed elsewhere: jewelers, resorts, a wire to a boutique investment advisor who specialized in alternatives. I visited the jeweler myself. The young man who greeted me had a tie too tight, and a mother, I'm sure of it, who taught him to be kind. I brought the ring I still wore, the one my husband gave me when we were too young to know what it would cost us to keep a promise. "I'm thinking of resizing it," I said. "Business must be good." I let him talk. He remembered my daughter-in-law. He remembered the bracelet. When I asked for a copy of the purchase order for insurance, he handed it over without thinking because I gave him a world where I'd once belonged. The spa required more finesse. They spoke in a vocabulary scented with eucalyptus oil. Packages had names that sounded like fairy tales. I asked about a gift certificate and learned, with enough questions, that my daughter-in-law had booked a year of treatments up front. The cost would have paid for my son's medication for 3 winters. The dealership was the easiest. The service manager knew my neighbor from chess club, and men who respect your opening move will be careful with your heart. He told us the monthly payment, the down payment, the extended warranty my daughter-in-law bought because she hates surprises. A car is a lovely way to make sure surprises only happen to other people. I wrote everything down in a notebook with a blue cover and a little elastic strap to keep it shut. The first page said $735,000. Under it, I made 2 columns, spent and owed. I began subtracting, a bracelet here, a package there, a car that depreciated the instant it left the lot. In the margins, I wrote the dates my son's appointments had been delayed. Beside those, I wrote my granddaughter's recital, the night he didn't show because he was resting. I wrote the name of the doctor who told me when I called that they'd been advised I was not to receive updates. "You can't cut a grandmother out," I said. "Privacy laws," she said, apologetic. So I started another list labeled witnesses, the pharmacist who saw who picked up the pills, the neighbor who heard the argument through her open kitchen window, my granddaughter's ballet teacher who remembered the day a car horn kept honking outside class while a child cried because her father had promised to watch her dance. I bought a small digital recorder that looked like a pen and wasn't. I do not like tricks. I like evidence, but some people only tell the truth when they think the room belongs to them. I brought cookies to my son's house and asked again about the money. "It's for treatment," he said, his eyes on the wall behind me where a television showed a beach somewhere I would not visit. I asked what hospital, what date. He glanced toward the kitchen. She walked in and spoke for him. "We have it under control," she said. "You don't need to carry this burden." "Whose burden?" I asked. "Your bracelet looks heavy." She laughed without sound. "Don't be petty," she said. "It doesn't suit you." "Stealing doesn't suit you either," I said, still polite, because I am old and know that calm is a weapon if you hold it correctly. She put a hand on my son's shoulder like a crown. "Mom's tired," she said to him, with that performance voice people use when they want everyone to hear and no one to think. Let's not upset her. I put down the cookie tin and touched the sleeve of the boy I had raised. "You can speak to me," I said. "You can look at me while you do." He looked. Guilt flickered across his face like a shadow a cloud makes when it decides on a different field to darken. "It's complicated," he said. "It's expensive," she corrected. "Also, we're late. Spa." I left without another word. The recorder stared back at me from my purse like a small, dark eye. The lawyer filed for a temporary restraining order on my share of the proceeds and an accounting of the funds. She attached every receipt I had gathered and wrote a letter that sounded like a bell tolling at a wedding no one wanted. It asked the court to consider whether a woman of my age had been exploited by the people most likely to benefit. It asked for a constructive trust over assets purchased with the money. It asked to freeze the car. "Will they lose everything?" I asked. I did not want destruction. I wanted restoration. "They will lose what is not theirs," she said. "That is a different thing." Process servers move faster than rumors, which is saying something. Papers arrived at their house on a Friday when my granddaughter had the flu and wanted me. My daughter-in-law called me 10 minutes later with a voice like chipped glass. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Are you trying to humiliate us?" "I'm trying to recover my home," I said. "And your husband's health." She didn't answer that. "You think you can win?" she asked. "You're not the only one who knows a lawyer." "I know love," I said. "It helps." The first hearing was a hallway full of strangers pretending they weren't afraid. My son stood with her, close enough that their shadows overlapped. He didn't meet my eyes. She carried a folder so thick I wondered what part of my life she had printed. Her attorney spoke in a steady, practiced rhythm. "Generosity is not exploitation," he said. A son can gift his share, and even his mother's share if she agreed to the sale by adding him to the deed. My client did not agree to fund a convertible, my lawyer said. We'll trace where each dollar went. The judge was patient the way I wish all humans were. He asked for a full accounting, bank statements, emails, texts. He frowned when he saw the outpatient visits my son had postponed. He frowned again at the spa package. He granted a temporary freeze on large transactions and set a date for further hearing. He made it sound like a pause button on a song I didn't want to dance to. That night, my son came to my apartment. I live in a small place over a florist shop now, and the air always smells like hope. He sat on my sofa and picked up the photo of him at 6 in a sweater I knit during a winter that would not end. "You had no right," he said. But his voice had no weight to carry anger across the room. "She's furious." "I imagine she is," I said. "Anger is what people use when they don't want to discuss facts." "She's not a thief." "She is not a careful person," I said. "And you are not a careful man right now." He looked at the floor where my cat had left a toy that used to have feathers on it. "I thought the money would take the fear away," he said. "Surgery, recovery, time off work, everything we can't plan for. She said she'd handle it." "Did she tell you how she handled it?" I asked. He didn't answer for a long time. Then he said, "If you ruin my marriage—" "I'm not ruining anything," I said softly, "because I am old enough to know when a boy is trying to keep something that never kept him." "You brought ruin into my kitchen. I am sending it back." He left without hugging me. The door closed like an apology that forgot to include the word sorry. I kept counting. The boutique investment advisor called to confirm details for compliance, and I said, cutting the man off mid-script, "Is the account in my daughter-in-law's name only, or is my son joint?" He hesitated. Silence reveals more than speech when you let it. "I see," I said. "Please send the source of funds documentation you received." He did, eventually, because he did not want a regulator to ask why he hadn't. The document was a transcript of a conversation in which my daughter-in-law explained that the funds were from a family home sale and that she had full permission to invest as she saw fit. Her handwriting on the form had red hearts above the eyes, exactly 3, like a girl who learned to sign her name in a different life. I went to the clinic next. My son's cardiologist is a woman younger than my son, which I hold against her, and like her for at the same time. She asked me to wait in a small room with a chair that seemed designed to make confidences feel purposeful. "I can't discuss his care," she said at first, "because rules are rules and she has a license she earned." I told her I didn't need details. I needed dates. Had he been coming? Had the plan changed? Had someone interfered because it served them to keep him frightened? She looked at me as if I had named something she had feared herself. "I can tell you this," she said. "Your son is not following the plan we discussed. Delays are not in his interest." I left the clinic feeling both vindicated and sick. I walked to a park bench and watched a boy throw a ball for a dog who refused to pretend he'd give it back. I called my lawyer and said, "The money is not just money," she said. "It never is." The second hearing was set for a Tuesday. On Sunday evening, my granddaughter called me from her room in a whisper so fierce it turned 10 into 40. "Daddy's sick," she said. "He's white. Mommy told him to sleep. I think he's crying." I put on my coat over my nightgown and drove. He opened the door, pale and sweating. "It's nothing," he said. I stood up too fast. I made him sit. I gave him water. I asked where the nitroglycerin was. He said they hadn't renewed because the doctor is overcautious. I called the on-call number myself and spoke to a nurse who listened the way my lawyer did, quietly, without making me feel dramatic. She told me to bring him in. My daughter-in-law appeared at the top of the stairs with a towel in her hair and annoyance in her eyes. "This is not an emergency," she said. "We were about to watch a movie." "Then watch it without us," I said. "We are leaving." At the emergency room, my son tried to be brave. He made a joke to the triage nurse and then gripped the edge of the plastic chair when a wave of pain dared him to laugh again. Tests were run, words were said. Stable, baseline, stay overnight. My daughter-in-law arrived in heels that clicked down the hall like punctuation. She kissed him and glared at me. "You love drama," she said. "I love my son," I said. "They are not the same thing." A resident asked who could authorize decisions if they needed to be made quickly. My son looked at his wife and then at me. The thread between them pulled taut again. I felt the tug where it was tied to my heart. "We'll both be here," I said. "We'll manage." At 3 a.m., while my son slept, she sat across from me in a plastic chair, her knees crossed like a barricade. "You are going to lose," she said. "You don't have the stamina for this." "I raised a child alone," I said. "I grew tomatoes in soil everyone said was too thin. I taught other people's children to make music out of wood and wire. Stamina is not your problem." "What is my problem then?" She smiled as if she were in on the joke. "You think money is a costume you can wear until people call you beautiful," I said, "but it stains. People can see it. People can see envy too," she said. "I am not envious," I said. "I am furious. It's different. Anger is useful if you hold it correctly." She stood. "I have a facial at 10, she said. "You can stay and play nurse." She left. I watched my son sleep and remembered the string of nights he had colic, and I walked the length of the hallway singing hymns I didn't believe in, inventing new verses until the sky changed color. In the morning, the cardiologist came by full of sentences that began with the word if. If he follows the plan, if he takes what we prescribe, if he stops delaying. I nodded until I felt like a bobblehead in the gift shop. "I'll talk to him," I said. "He listens to me when he's scared." The hearing came anyway. This time, the judge had a stack of papers with our names on them. He asked questions that dug under the edges of our lives. Why was the deed amended? Why were the proceeds not split into separate accounts? Why were certain purchases made within 24 hours of the wire? My daughter-in-law's attorney said she had every right to make financial decisions for her household. Mine said a household was not an alibi. The judge asked about my son's health. My son said he was managing, which is a word people use when the truth is inconvenient. Then the twist I had been waiting for fell into the room like a book from a shelf. My lawyer produced the form from the investment advisor, the one with the red hearts over the eyes. She had highlighted a box my daughter-in-law checked that said, "I am the sole owner of this account, and the funds are my separate property." The judge lifted his eyebrows by about a millimeter. "Where did the funds come from?" he asked. "Proceeds of a family home," she said. We agreed. "Who is we?" he asked. "My husband and I," she said. "He gave me—" She didn't finish because my lawyer was already handing up a bank statement with lines that told a better story. The money moved from escrow to a joint account in both their names, then into an account only in hers, then out to the bracelet, the car, the spa. The judge granted the constructive trust over assets purchased after the sale and ordered the temporary seizure of the car pending the final decision. The sheriff's deputy took the keys from her outside the courthouse where pigeons have seen every sad thing you can imagine. She screamed then, not words, but a sound a person makes when the mirror they rely on cracks in public. My son put a hand on her back, gentle and useless. The deputy was kind in a way that made me want to send his mother flowers. "You can collect personal items," he said, as if he were asking if she'd like extra napkins. That night, I slept for 2 hours in a row, the most I had managed in weeks. When I woke, my neighbor was at the door with coffee and a list of the next things we needed. A forensic accountant to trace the rest, a second motion to restrain the sale of the bracelet, a subpoena for spa records. We were building a tower of paper that might one day be a ladder out of this. The forensic accountant was a woman with a smile that made you feel silly for thinking a spreadsheet was only numbers. She spoke to me the way good teachers speak to children they respect. She confirmed what we suspected. Within 3 days of the sale, more than half the funds had been spent or committed. The rest sat in an account linked to my daughter-in-law's brokerage, where it had already lost money to fees with names that sounded like furniture, custody, platform, wrap. "Can we get it back?" I asked. We can keep it from disappearing, she said, and we can ask the court to light a path it has to come back on. I brought my granddaughter a new pair of ballet slippers because children grow even when adults behave like storms. We sat on my floor and tied bows, and I tried to breathe like there was still air in the room. She looked up. "Mommy says you hate her?" she said. "I don't hate her," I said. "I don't trust her. Those are not the same either." "Daddy's going to be okay," she said, a declaration, not a question. "Yes," I said, "because we are going to help him." "How?" "By making sure grown-ups do the things they promised." The final hearing took months to arrive because courts move on calendars and pain moves on minutes. In that time, my son had a procedure and then another, one successful, one postponed because his numbers were wrong and he'd run out of courage the morning of. I took him to appointments he pretended were errands. He ate soup at my table and didn't ask what ingredients I couldn't afford. He began to sit with me in the evenings while I played the piano quietly, as if the notes might convince his heart to remember its job. My daughter-in-law began to shrink without the ballast of other people's money. She sold handbags online and called it curating. She pitched a business idea to a friend, wellness retreats for stressed moms, that required a deposit the friend did not make. She took the bus once and told everyone about it as if she had done something heroic. I kept my anger folded and put away where I could find it when I needed it, like a dress for court. The night before the hearing, she called me. "You could stop this," she said. "You could say you forgive us." "Forgiveness is a math problem you do after the accounting is complete," I said. "We haven't finished subtracting." "I made mistakes," she said. "But your son knew. He wanted me to be happy." "He wanted not to be afraid," I said. "You gave him distraction and called it love?" "Everybody wants nice things," she said. And in that moment, I felt sorry for her in a small, sharp way, not for the things she had done, but for the smallness of the world she believed in. The courtroom was colder than usual. The judge wore the same expression he had at the first hearing, which I was beginning to trust. My lawyer presented the tracing. This dollar bought that bracelet. That wire paid for that car. These charges were spa, resort, club. This remaining sum sat in an account under the spell of fees. She showed the spreadsheet like a map that leads out of the woods. My daughter-in-law's lawyer argued fairness and family and intent. He said I had given them the house already by adding my son to the deed. My lawyer pointed out that giving someone a key is not the same as giving them the right to empty your closets in the night. Then came the moment I had not planned for. The judge asked my son to speak. He stood and the room tilted toward him, as rooms do when a person who rarely tells the truth decides to try. He cleared his throat and said, "I thought I was protecting my family. I thought if she had control, I wouldn't have to be the one to say, 'We can't afford that,' or 'I'm afraid.' I thought if I sold the house, I could be brave without being brave. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for your home. I'm sorry I made you the price of my fear." My daughter-in-law stiffened beside him. The thread I'd seen tying them together went slack. The judge nodded in a way that made me think he had a son as well. He ruled 2 hours later. The words were not poetry, but they were a balm. The court imposed a constructive trust over the bracelet and any proceeds from its sale. It ordered the car sold, with the proceeds to be deposited into an account bearing my name as beneficiary, pending final allocation. And it froze the remaining funds and directed that all medical expenses for my son be paid from that pool after approval by a neutral trustee. It ordered my daughter-in-law to reimburse from any separate assets the spa prepayments and to provide a full accounting of any transfers to third parties. It did not jail anyone. It did not rage. It simply told the truth and then told us what to do about it. She cried again, quieter this time, the way people cry when they might finally be listening to their own sound. My son sat with his head in his hands. I put my palm on his neck the way I had when he was a feverish boy and felt a pulse working. "We will get through this," I said. "We will, but we will do it the right way." Recovery is dull, which is why people prefer drama. The bracelet sold at auction for less than it had cost because vanity depreciates faster than cars. The convertible went next and made a sound with its exhaust like surrender. The spa refunded half because even illusions have policies. The advisor unwound positions and returned fees more quickly than I expected because regulators ask sharp questions. Money came back in slow, embarrassed drips. I signed papers to put the funds into a trust I controlled but could not misuse. The trustee was a woman from church who has a talent for spreadsheets and mercy. We paid the hospital first, we paid the clinic, we paid for a second opinion that confirmed the first. We put aside a sum for my granddaughter's education because not all debts are financial. Whatever was left, I used to buy a small bungalow with a porch and a piano that fit better than my old one ever did. I planted tomatoes in a raised bed my neighbor built from cedar boards, and I waited for something green to tell me we had not ruined the soil. My daughter-in-law moved out of my son's house 2 weeks after the car went away. She said she needed space to think, which was true, and then said she needed to be somewhere with better shopping, which sounded like a joke until you realized she was serious. She took a job selling makeup online and made videos under good light. Sometimes I watch them with the sound off and wonder what she hears when she plays them back. My son spent 3 nights a week with me while he learned how to live with fear without buying things to put on top of it. He helped me carry groceries and did not mind when I asked what he had eaten that day. We walked in the evenings when the heat let go, and once he said, I kept waiting for the courage to show up. It didn't. Courage isn't a guest, I said. It's a chore. You do it even when you're tired. He picked a tomato and handed it to me like an apology that had finally grown something. I don't know if she ever loved me, he said. People love the way they know how, I said. Sometimes that's not enough. The day the trust cut a check for the last of the hospital bills, my granddaughter danced in our living room to music I played too quietly and then too loud. She laughed and told me I was reckless. I told her I was 72 and had earned the right to be noisy. My son leaned in the doorway and watched us as if we were a life he wanted. After she went to bed, he looked at me and said, I don't deserve forgiveness. Deserving is a word we made up to comfort ourselves, I said. You need forgiveness. That's enough. I'm going to file for legal separation, he said. I can't keep paying for her choices. Make a list, I said. Not of her sins, of your promises. Keep those. Let the rest go. Months later, we sat in a different courtroom for a different reason. The separation wasn't dramatic. It was careful. She wanted the furniture. He wanted the cat. They split the things that could be split and sent what remained to charity. The judge asked about debt. My son said he would carry the medical debt not covered by the trust. My lawyer handed the judge the order establishing the trust and its purposes. The judge nodded and wrote something in the margin I couldn't see. Outside, my daughter-in-law approached me like a girl who lost a game she hated playing. I never thought you'd fight this hard, she said. I never thought you'd steal from your own future, I said. She looked at my son, then at the ground. He was afraid, she said. I made it easy. Love rarely is, I said. She left. My son watched her go with the kind of expression you wear when you can feel where something used to be. We went home and ate soup and counted the seconds between the clock's ticks because we are alive and sometimes that is enough. One evening, the realtor who sold my house called to say the new owners were thinking of moving again. The husband had a job offer elsewhere. The house would come back to market. Do you want me to send the listing? She asked. I walked to the piano before I answered. I played the first hymn I ever learned, and then the jazz I taught myself when I got tired of other people's rules. No, I said. I don't need that house to remember who I am. What do you need? She asked. To keep my promises, I said, to my son, to my granddaughter, to the woman who believed her life could be sold out from under her and was wrong. And that weekend, we invited the neighbors for tomatoes and lemonade. We sat on the porch and told stories about the weather and about long ago summers when kids drank from hoses and adults let them because we didn't know better or because we did. My son laughed, and it sounded like a sound he hadn't made in years. My granddaughter fell asleep on my lap and drooled on my shirt, and I wore the wet spot like a medal. Sometimes at night, I take out the blue notebook with the elastic strap and read the first page, 735,000, and then the columns that used to make me shake. I run my finger down the list of what we recovered and what we lost and what we chose to let go of. Then I close it and put it back where it belongs. I no longer need it to remind me that a home is not made of wood or equity or even pencil marks on a door frame. It is made of the names you can still say without flinching. I thought my revenge would be a fight, loud enough to be heard in the next county. It turned out to be a ledger, balanced without cruelty, a car key returned, a bracelet turned into a check that turned into a bill paid in full. It turned out to be a boy looking up at his mother and saying, "I'm sorry." It turned out to be me, standing in a kitchen that smelled like furniture polish and cinnamon, recognizing that a woman my age can still be the person who ends what needs ending. When I see my daughter-in-law in the grocery store now, we nod, like people who remember when they both believe something incorrect about themselves. She buys sparkling water, I buy flour. We both avoid the aisle with the magazines that promise better lives in 12 steps. Sometimes my granddaughter asks if mommy can come to her recital. I tell her yes, if it's okay with daddy, because complexity is an education you can't refuse your children without charging them interest later. On the morning I finished paying off the last of the hospital bills, I baked a lemon cake. I lit the candles for no reason and invited my neighbor with the chessboard and the service manager who had been kinder than the badge required, and the young man from the jeweler who had remembered my daughter-in-law's exact bracelet and exact smile. We cut slices the way you do when there is enough. My son washed the plates afterward and didn't complain. He kissed my cheek on his way out the door and didn't look over his shoulder to see if permission followed him like a child. Before I went to bed, I walked out to the porch and looked at the street where the convertible used to sit. The night was ordinary, which felt like a luxury. I locked the door because I have learned that love does not replace good habits. I turned off the kitchen light and listened to the house breathe. It sounded like a woman counting backward from a number that had once been too large to imagine and now felt like proof that she could begin again. That is how I took back every penny that mattered, not because I wanted to watch someone else lose, but because I refused to be a receipt in someone else's story.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.